Hello, hello. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Today we're lucky enough to get to speak with Grace Walker, author of Ash. And I don't even know where to begin with this because when I was reading your submission, it was like 3 a.m. and I just couldn't quite put the story down. It was one of those where it took me two sittings simply because I ran out of time on my first one. And it was just the pacing, it was gripping. The entirety of it, it was hard to put down. And maybe I'm biased because I'm a huge sci-fi junkie, but it was just I love the world building you put into it. I love the dystopian elements to it. And you had the romance throughout that just really kept us on our toes. So hats off to you. It was a fantastic story.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
I think that the story caught me at first because the opening scene was fantastic. That if you describe a good laser sizzle or something like that in the air, then I'm pretty much invested from the outset. But what came after it was a complete I read the first chapters of things and went, yeah, this is good. I'll send it on to Ryan, and then I get a chance to read it myself. I went, well, okay, this wasn't the laser sizzle that I was expecting. Different kind of sizzle, if I may. It was a if I look back at my notes, one of the first things that I'd written after the intro was done was, well, that's a kissing scene in capital letters. Well, that's a kiss, right? uh, and that, but so I wasn't expected to be what it was, and I loved that about it because Kade isn't the kind of character like you. I'm used to reading sci-fi where the main character is, John Halo, and he's got a rifle or something. He shoots aliens and stuff. And that's cool. I like that. That's great. But Cade was a really kind of vulnerable character, especially for a guy. So I wanted to start off with the characters before we get to Ash and everything. And Xeiryn, if that's how you pronounce it, how do you pronounce Ziara?
Ziara.
Perfect.
You
Yeah.
got it.
So it took me a little bit of time. I think I was 3 books in to my, well, seven, but 3 books into my writing career before I dared to kind of try writing from a female perspective. What was it like writing from a guy's perspective?
Well, it was kind of tricky. I wanted to capture, there's this thing about guys written by women. I wanted to write a
Yeah.
guy that was as realistic as I possibly could from a female perspective, while also knowing that I wasn't going to capture that perfectly. And so, kind of taking some creative liberty. I see a lot of very stoic, like you said, male characters,
Mhm.
especially in sci fi. And I kind of wanted to explore something a little bit different and kind of go for a more vulnerable character that hadn't been hardened yet by the dystopian reality that he lived in.
Mhm.
And I think it was really fun for me to get to explore that different kind of character element while trying to
Mhm.
also keep true to, uh, I guess, him as a character.
Yeah, I really loved Cade. I didn't expect him to be the main character at first because when the perspective initially switches to Ash after a couple of chapters, I thought, well, Ash is what the book is called. Obviously, it's going to be Ash that's kind of the main character, and I loved Ash from the minute I met her anyway. But then I was like, oh no, wait, it's Cade's story. It's about Cade and following him and what he does elsewhere. So it kept that kind of twisty thing going where I was not quite sure what we are getting into. And I said this to Ryan earlier. Please take this in the most loving sense that I can possibly say it. But what I really loved about it was that it was kind of like Twilight for guys, where
Yeah.
you've got two really protective, powerful people kind of fighting for your affections. I was like, God, I was really invested when I realised that there was a little bit of a tug of war going on between the women in Cade's life, who are all very dangerous, quite powerful, and really brilliantly characterized women, and very similar but yet so different. So I guess I don't want to get into spoilers so quickly, but writing Ash and writing Ziara must have been pretty fun.
It really was. I loved getting to explore their characters and right, like you said, I really wanted something that was kind of like that reversal of what we so often see in these books.
Yeah.
Again, I read so much, and I read so many books where there's a singular female main character, and then she has two guys like vying for her attention. I was like, I kind of want to explore that in a different way, in a unique way, because I
Yeah.
really hadn't seen it the other way around very much. Um,
Yeah.
and I loved getting to explore. Like, I appreciate that you noticed the like they are similar, but they're also different.
Mm.
Or Ash
Yeah,
has
Cade's
a
got a
more like,
type. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, definitely. They're, Ash's protective kind of
Mhm.
nature versus Yara's like, I'm going to put you in dangerous situations because it's just what I
Yeah.
do, and I think it's okay. She's living her best life and just wants him included in that. Versus, Ash is just so protective. You can kind of I liked that there's a difference there, and I think Kate isn't quite sure which he prefers better, the more fun, dangerous life or the more protected, secure life. And so I liked having that kind of conflict in his world.
No,
Mhm.
it's really cool to see the dynamics because obviously the labeled relationship, as it were, between Cade and the other two, they're very different. But then there is the third woman in his life that is the one that's actively causing the problems, and like that being the queen. And it was crazy to see this like these three different people pulling at him and especially because it was made pretty clear that Kate is attractive as well. Like that playing a role in
Oh
it
yeah.
throughout was an interesting one. And I think it just goes
Who
back
who
to
did you who did you picture him as? Who were you seeing in your head when you read it?
easily Fabio.
Oh, I had Timothy Chalamet. Like I thought that
Yes,
was pretty
it was
right.
Timothy Chalamet. That was a huge
Yes.
reference for me.
It was when they said the like his black curls and stuff coming out from it. I was like, I know who I'm picturing. That's fine.
Yeah, that was totally. I will admit, Kate was a little bit of a self-insert on my part. So
Yeah, well, there's a part near the
I'm
start where
guilty
he's
there.
lying in bed. He's lying in bed or something, waiting on Ash. She's about to head out. I think it's the third chapter or something. And I'd seen The King recently with Timothy Chalamet in it. It was a great
Yeah.
movie, and that was exactly what I saw in my head. I made the connection there, and that stuck for the whole thing.
That's so funny. I'm glad that came through, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I got that. Especially like he's great in those kind of like because Cade's not he's not exactly submissive. He kind of has to make himself small because of the world that he's in. But like I liked how early on, even though he's basically enslaved, basically kind of chattel, he's got power in his own way. Like he's got his own kind of sway, and that's his attractiveness and his kind of. I wrote in my notes I'd written down like, oh, you think he's weak, but he's kind of like a certified lover boy. Like he knows what he's doing with the ladies. He knows how attractive he is. He can use that, and I thought that was such a brilliant inversion of what I see in most sci-fi, especially with like cool alien people in it and stuff.
Well, I think
Well, thank you.
it also goes into the world building of
Mhm.
this planet was not made like humans are not meant to succeed on this planet in any way, shape, or form. Like if you're here, you're pretty much. I mean, I don't see an alternative where you're not indentured because you need forgive me for getting this wrong, but you need like the thing to help you breathe, basically.
Hmm.
Evior, Ivoire, however you
Yeah,
pronounce it.
Avior,
If you're
Avior,
Evior.
Avior.
Yeah.
Um, so having that dynamic where you have a human as very much the bottom of the pecking order was quite interesting to kind of navigate as well because like Steve said, like he wasn't necessarily submissive, but he had to figure out, I don't want to say niche, but he had to figure out his kind of role within the planet to make it work for him because otherwise he was just like you don't ever see him getting off world if he's just kind of committing to the bit, as it were.
Hmm. Yeah, it was really. I really wanted to create a unique. There's a theme going. I wanted to create something unique for this planet. I hadn't. It was something I hadn't really seen before. And as someone who reads a lot and consumes a ton of media as a writer to try and get inspiration and better my craft, I was like, I don't see this very often, and I wanted to kind of explore like what it would be like to live in a world where you really don't have, at least here, you don't have an option of things getting better, and you really do have to figure out, like you said, figure out your place and kind of confine yourself and, if you will, like, trim down your personality and to fit a role. Like on Xeiryn, you're less of a person and more of a role that you play. What rank do you fit into? What species are you? And I think reducing those people down to the roles that they play in society is a really I think it truly does create a dystopian reality whenever you stop thinking of, people as like a person and just, oh, well, what role do you play in this world? Like what labels can we niche you under? So I kind of wanted to explore that concept.
And I wanted to kind of add on to that in terms of, well, going back a step about you saying, because maybe this was from the first time we spoke or something I read on your Twitter, but you couldn't find a sci-fi story that like basically you created a sci-fi story that you wanted to read. And how did that feel
Mhm.
just in terms of does it give you the same satisfaction to read it since you created it? This is something I've always been curious about.
Um, I would say it's that's kind of yes and no. I do read my own books. I don't know how many people do that, but I do read my own books
Oh, I do it all
occasionally.
the time, yeah.
Because I really did. I wrote it for myself, and I do read it to kind of because I love these characters. I mean, as a writer, you connect so deeply with these people that you make up, and it feels very good and familiar to get to like reconnect with them via reading the book. As an author, it's a double-edged sword because I'm like, oh, I could have structured that sentence better. Oh, there's like I wish I wouldn't have put that comma there. I wish I would have put it somewhere else. So I don't do that whenever I read other people's books. I do that whenever I read my books. So that does take a tiny bit of the enjoyment out of it. But overall, I would say, yeah, I do enjoy. I enjoy reading it.
I think, see, like whenever like recently I done a kind of rerun of my first trilogy and just fixed up a bunch of things, like it's been out for a couple of years, you get some reviews and you're like, oh, I could do that a little bit better. I could fix it up a little bit. And going back and reading them again to do that, I still hit all the same moments. I was like, God, who wrote this? This is great. This is exactly my kind of thing. I was like, of course it's my kind of thing. I wrote it.
Well, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
But I think you should be the audience for your books first and foremost. I think Sienna Frost said that once, and I think it rings true. Like, write for yourself, don't write for anyone else. Who cares what anyone else thinks? As long as you like it, then you'll find people like you who like that kind of thing as well.
I couldn't agree more. I try to uphold that principle in my writing and my life altogether. It's just, I wrote it for
Yeah,
for
word.
for me and for people like me who enjoy that, who want that kind of subversion of sci-fi and
Yeah.
kind of a different sort of story.
And I love a bit of subversion. Speaking of, we were talking about Timothy Chalamet earlier, and I'm really curious who you cast in your head as Ziara and Ash. And if any of the other ones are in there, feel free to throw them in as well.
That I will admit that's a little harder. I hadn't thought of Ash as much. Ziara, I would love. I don't know. I haven't quite pictured an actress for her. I think I'd like someone with a little bit of an accent. I've always pictured Ziara with like just the tiniest bit of maybe like an Australian accent, just a little something kind of fun. Since she is an alien, I like to give all my aliens different accents. And so I think that would be kind of fun for her. Really, I would just want someone who could capture like the full extent and also the double sides of her personality. Versus Ash, I have someone in my brain, but I can't quite think of her name, but someone tall. Her Ash's height was kind of a cool character element that would want to
Yeah.
keep. So someone, tall, dark brunette, that could fit that kind of sort of larger than life role that Ash plays in the story. Which is, I
I
mean,
think I
that's
saw
why
her as a
sorry.
I think I saw her as a bit kind of elven in our proportions and stuff, kind of like that tall, willowy, but strong kind
Mhm.
of way. I had somewhere maybe between like Elizabeth Debicki and Eva Green kind of thing. Like she had that goth thing going on.
Yeah.
And then Ziara had the kind of opposite, I guess. Where, yeah, I
Mhm.
definitely get the Australian thing with Ziara. In my head, I was like, she's kind of like party girl, looks the part. Big sister, kind of weird, but not quite. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
good women to go on a night out with.
Yep. That was kind of
Which I
the
think
vibe I was getting.
when I got to the part where she drags Kade out on a night out and they end up kind of dancing away in the night time, I made a specific note down. I was like, oh, I've been on nights out like this where it's like you're feeling bad. You need to come out. And it reminded me of, if anything else, of kind of Mass Effect, kind of a bit Farscape kind of thing. So I wanted to dive into the kind of inspirations and your favorite sci-fi and where you draw your ideas from. So I know you said that you love to consume media as a writer, and I couldn't agree more. Everything that I watch, I'm constantly thinking, what can I take from it? What did I like about it? What did I want to recreate and do it my own way? So tell me a bit about what brought you to Ash then.
Well, I think I really, again, I wanted to like whenever I was developing this story, the first idea I got was for that opening scene. I was like, I want to create a story that just immediately hooks you, because I see a lot of books that kind of slowly introduce and they add a lot of world building
Yeah.
and like context, and that's
Mhm.
like totally fine. That's a style, but I was like, I really want something that like starts off with a bang and like just pulls your
Yeah.
attention immediately. And so I got that idea, that scene from just, kind of daydreaming. I come up with all my stories just
Yeah.
daydreaming. And so I was like, that would be a really cool scene. And, and then I started developing the character of Kade and then Ash. And I was like, and I, kind of started that. And I wanted to create a very unique world. I definitely took influence from the book Six of Crows. I feel like that was such a unique book, and I loved the morally gray protagonist. I
Mhm.
felt like that really fit, and I was like, I like that air of someone who, is willing to do whatever it takes to survive. And so I applied that a lot to Ash's character. Um, and I also pulled influence from Dune. I had just watched it around the time
Yep. Yep.
I wrote it, and I was like, I just fell in love with that movie. I've watched it so many
Yeah.
times.
Same.
I I loved the desert planet. I was like, that's such a cool element. And I liked how I was like, okay, well, this is a desert planet that has, spice in the sand. And I was like,
Mhm.
well, what if we had a desert planet where it was the air? And instead of having the hallucinogenic properties of spice, it just, you know, decayed your lungs from the inside out. And so I was like,
I
there
think
you
that
go. That's a setting. We can write a story about that. Like, there's got to be enough conflict there and interest to write a story. So
there
that
was
was a huge.
the first time that I read Spice on the page, I made a little note and I went, I'm seeing it. I see the influence. It's hard not to. June's such a seminal work as well. And the movies are phenomenal. I think the last time I had a long distance flight, I watched both of them back to back.
Mhm.
And I mean, the books are great, the movies are great as well. But I see you on the June influence. And what about with things? So, right, this is something I wanted to get into, and I'm just going to take a swing in the dark and see if it lands. So, when I first started reading it, I made a note of there was a frequent use of things like, italics for thoughts, which I see kind of like speech bubbles, like text boxes. And there's a lot of visual intensity, and what's described. It's quite brief, but it's quite evocative. That's what I liked about it. And there's a lot of onomatopoeia where there's like sound effects and sensations and stuff. And the first reference that I made in my notes was, this feels a bit like a graphic novel or like a kind of dark manga or something in its style. And I wanted to know if that was deliberate or if that was something that had any influence.
It was deliberate. When I originally
Yes.
started when I started concepting Ash, I wrote it as a script for a webtoon
Right.
that,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
was gonna. That's why I think that's what really allowed me to craft. I think that's my favorite opening scene I've written, and I think what
Yeah.
allowed me to craft it is that I wrote it I described everything. I described the art that I
Mhm.
wanted, and then I had very
Yeah.
brief, lines of dialogue as you would in a webtoon or a graphic novel. And although I ended up changing the medium in which I wanted to write it, because I felt like I wanted to have more dialogue and character and
Mhm.
world building than I could do just on the pages of a graphic novel or a webtoon.
Mhm.
I tried to keep that kind of snappy element. What I love about like graphic novels and webtoons is the dialogue. I feel like every line of dialogue is very important because there's so
Yep.
few of them, and
It's
there's a lot
space.
more
Yeah.
things open. Like, you see an image and you can kind of interpret what you want through the body language or the expression. And so those
Mhm.
dialogue lines are very key, and they've been polished to perfection in a lot of cases. And I was like, I obviously, I have a lot more dialogue, so it's not like every line is going to be perfect, but like especially I want to have meaning behind all of these lines and not have just a ton of, you know,
Mhm.
unnecessary description or like bogging down of the sentences. I was like, I want to keep things
Yeah.
light and snappy the way that you would in a, graphic novel.
And
Yeah, I guess in a graphic novel, words are space on a page, and space on a page is money, and you've got to consider everything. It's got to kind of earn its space. But it's so cool that that was a thing. The minute I saw it, I wondered if it was deliberate. It's really cool that it was. And when you're talking about snappy things, so when I was reading the dialogue as well, I got a real sense of that, like lines and lines of just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It was a little bit kind of, I want to say like Joss Whedon, like Firefly, Buffy kind of thing. Or those things that you're fans of. I got a sense of that.
I haven't. I used Firefly. I have
Oh,
not. I have not
no.
actually. I will admit I don't. I don't watch a ton. I read a ton, but I don't watch a ton.
Yeah.
So I have. I haven't recommended that though. So it's one that I've have on my list.
I think the other thing that stuck out was just on that point of it, it leaves a lot for the reader to interpret. So everyone can have these different interpretations and these different ideas of what the planet could look like or what the off-world planets could look like or what even the characters could look like when you start bringing in outside of the human like realm. And I think that that's always really fun because I can completely interpret it different than Steve or than yourself. And even depends on like if you're going into it with as a creator, if you're going into it with the idea of, oh, I want it to look like this, or I'm going to give a very vague description and just see what people come up with mentally. But one of the things I wanted to ask was obviously there is the huge kind of there's a few climaxes throughout the story, but like there's the big one where there's the separation between the two of them. And it leaves us from because I think it's interesting when you get into the whole you start jumping perspectives when you have two main characters, but then we just don't hear about Ash and until obviously spoilers until the end.
Spoiler alert. Also, I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah, yeah. So what when you were writing about Kate and Kate's side of the story for the majority of the book, was Ash in the background? Like, did you have Ash's story kind of building up in the background, or was it more the case of there she is, have fun, figure it out?
I did have some idea of Ash. I did consider adding a scene or two of Ash in the first book
Mm.
after their separation, but I decided not to because I wanted to kind of keep the true mystery, leave the reader as
Mm.
in the dark as Cade was. That way,
Mhm.
at that hit at the end, it felt just as impactful for the reader as it did for him.
Mm.
But I did have an idea of her in my mind, and I mean, I could write a short story about all the stuff she did in the time period that he was gone. But I wanted to, so she was in the back of my mind, but I really wanted to focus on Cade's story
Mm.
because I think I connected with him more on a more emotional level as a character. And so I wanted to like truly explore that and let him explore what it was like to have independence because that was something he's never experienced before. Uh, and so that was more of what was on the focus of my mind.
Which honestly makes a lot of sense because like there's a lot of things that Kate is experiencing for the first time, and like in a very different way because you have the independence, you also have the grief, and you have like discovering a new place and all these kind of elements. And I found it interesting because whenever he told anyone, "Oh, I'm from here," he didn't necessarily have a chip on his shoulder for it. But everyone else was like, "Oh, yikes!" Like,
Yeah.
and it was an interesting dynamic because like just being from somewhere like checks a box or just being from somewhere says so much. And especially when you go back to what we said earlier, to what you said earlier about different people having different roles. And on a planet like Xerin, it being very clear what those roles are. So like somebody will see him and they already will have those kind of assumptions going off. So it was cool to kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? It's the extension of the world building that goes so much further than just physically like, oh, there's a mountain over there. Like it's very layered, which I'm a huge fan of.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to, I enjoy getting to kind of, I love to world build as much as I possibly can, but without doing it in just like an, oh, and there was this and there was that, and he had a reputation because of this. I really wanted to kind of naturally include that as much as I could in the story of, oh yeah, like he's from Xeiryn. It immediately, there's so many assumptions that people make about him, like, oh, like, he must have he had a hard time, he had a rough life, like he must have done things to survive that a normal person wouldn't consider doing. And it kind of gives him a reputation that among people, just as soon as you say it, that it's like, oh yeah, like you're something else, something you've experienced, something that most of us can't even comprehend. And it kind of makes people, I would think, wary in a way. Unless, of course, and he's found this crew that has also, though, gone through similar things. And of course, not to the extent, but similar things where, like, I don't quite understand, but I can relate to you more than just your average person can.
Yeah, I feel you. So there's something I wanted to ask because I'm conscious that we're almost running out of time. Two things. The first one is whether or not you were aware of. So this was going to be a was it deliberate thing. The first time that we meet Kade, he's running. He hates running. He tells the reader that he hates running. The second time when we go back from Ash to meet Kade again, he's running or he's walking. I can't remember. It's one of the two, but he's like, I'm walking again. I hate walking, or I'm running again. I hate running. And I went, I see a pattern. And then when they get off the ship in the desert, Xeiryn says, oh, I hate walking. And I was like, God damn it, Grace, that was a golden opportunity to hit us with it again. But was that a deliberate little inversion of it, or was that just something that got through the net?
It was a slight. I wanted to have her kind of have a thing that was, it kind of shows that she has a similar thought process to him.
Yeah,
and he's like, oh,
yeah.
I hate running. I hate running. This is so boring. And Ziara's like, well, I hate walking because it's like, Kade's running and he doesn't like it. He's like, this is too much. I don't want to do this. And Ziara's like, I hate walking. This isn't interesting enough for me. I need that like excitement because, Ziara's like,
stimulation.
Like, yeah. Ziara's like, ooh, lasers and danger. This is fun. And Kate's like, I just want to go home. I don't want to do this.
The juxtaposition between the two of them really made them like a real fun, like ragtag bunch. Because I think I've been tweeting about it recently, just about side characters kind of stealing the show or this or that. And there were elements where Xeiryn was doing that, like where it was just like, this is a woman I die for, even though like she's the one putting you in danger. Like,
yeah. Yes, that's exactly what I wanted her to the energy I wanted her to give. So I'm glad it came across that way. I really wanted her and Kade to have a unique relationship. And it's like you said with, you leave a lot open for interpretation. Some people have kind of been like, oh, like I can totally see this love triangle you set up. And other people are like, oh, they have such sibling energy. Like they're besties. And so I left it where it's kind of like, it's up, like as the reader, you can interpret it based on your personal experience and kind of see
they're definitely getting together. Definitely.
Really? I read the opposite. I was like, oh, they're just buds.
Oh, really? Right, I tell you what I think is going to happen. I've not read the next book, so I don't know. But I think Kade is going to meet Ash again, fall in love with her all over again, find out she's a totally different person because of what she had to do when he was away, and he's a totally different person now as well. And then he sees that Xeiryn was the woman that he thought he wanted all along. But either way, he's got a protective, tough, powerful female figure in his life who looks after him and loves him. I think that's my take.
I disagree. I think he falls in love with
that's what
queen.
I want.
I think he falls in love with the queen and then he becomes the head of the syndicates.
Oh, do you hear that? That would be cool. I like that. That'd be cool.
That would be a subversion. That would be a very interesting subversion.
They've been popping up lately. The Disney's like what if series, like what if Aladdin never found a lamp kind of thing. Like what if Kade just stuck with the queen?
Yeah, well, I think he would do well in the role, but I think he's a little too dedicated to Ash.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about him. So as we come to the end, the last thing I wanted to ask about Grace has nothing to do with the book, actually. It was that when I got to the end of the book, I saw your Amazon profile. and it said you published your first book when you were 14.
I did.
What? Tell me how that went. How did that come about?
Well, like I said, I've always been a reader, just been
Hmm.
loved books all of my life. And when I was, I think, 13, I started drafting over summer break. I got this idea. I was like, what if there was sci-fi, but what if there was magic in it? And my little like 13-year-old
Hmm.
brain was like, let's do sci-fi, but everyone has magic powers where it's like, it's not the Force, like not Star Wars magic, like actual fantasy magic powers.
Mm.
And so that's kind of where that idea came from. And I wrote it over summer break and self-published it the next year. And it was kind of I only did it because I wanted to have a book in my hands. I was like, oh yeah, I'll make one copy for myself, no big
Hmm.
deal. But then my family were reading it, my friends were reading it, and it was like, oh, this is kind of a thing now. And so I
Yeah.
finished out, I only meant for it to be one book, but then I ended up turning into a trilogy. And I kind of closed that out. And I was like, okay, well, that was kind of my idea. And I'm done with that idea now. And then I started gathering inspiration for the Rogues Legends series, which Ash is the first book of. And I was kind of like, I feel like I definitely want to keep doing this. And so I, kind of took some time to think about it and like truly develop the story to a point where I was happy with it. And then started writing that and published Ash. And that was the one that I actually got some reception with it, and I had strangers reading it and telling me they loved it, and it was just like, wow, this is such an amazing experience, and I'm so blessed that I got to have this incredible experience that I never thought I would have. I thought I'd be like, oh, one or two people might read it, and I've had
Yeah.
dozens of people that have read it and then been kind enough to say nice things or leave a review or and of course it's what allowed me to be part of your paper quest, and that of course was so
Word.
exciting for
Yeah.
me.
With the
Speaking of
last,
which, I think we're about to run out of time.
yeah,
Ryan, how we
yeah,
doing? You want to
I'm,
close
I'm
us
gonna
out?
take over from you, Steve. So with the last 90 seconds, for people who liked Ash, where's the best way they can get a hold of you? What do you recommend they read next? Obviously, there's a sequel. You've got about a minute.
Well, best way, I am on Twitter. That's my only social media right now. So you're welcome to contact me there. I'm always up to talk about my books. So, or anything writing related. So happy to hear from anyone on Twitter. Read next, I would say the sequel for Ash is out. We'll warn there's a little bit of a surprising ending, but hopefully it's overall an enjoyable and satisfying conclusion to Kade, Ash, and Xeyryn's character arcs. And then I am currently working on the next book in this universe that will focus on new characters, but in the same world and kind of further explore this galaxy.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really cool.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and honestly just deep diving. It's always so nice to actually get the behind the scenes of what goes on. But yeah, thank you again. And for those of you that managed to make it the entire interview and forgot, the story was Ash by Grace Walker. Enjoy the rest of the day, guys.
Twilight
Thank
for
you for
guys.
having
Check
me.
it out.
Twilight for guys.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you for having me.
Take
Bye,
care.
Grace.